solutions-oriented in its reporting on various proposals. And it's this solutions-oriented spirit that led us to ask Mr. Paulson to join us this evening. We hope you will keep it in mind as you engage in your own deliberations. I'd like you to welcome Monty Paulson.
Thank you for coming. I'm amazed that so many people want to come out and talk about this on cold November night. Our office is just a few blocks from here. As I walked over this evening, I got panhandled twice. That's the second time I noticed that I didn't make eye contact with the people that I crossed paths with on the street anymore. It kind of froze and tightened a little bit. And it just reminded me of how homelessness and these social issues cheapen all of our lives every day. All of a sudden, for me, walking here, the Vancouver that I love became a little less personal, a little less friendly, a little less connected to the people around me. So I'm going to try to make a real effort to get out of that tonight, and I hope you'll all do the same. I hope you'll join us in just really opening up, kind of expanding ourselves emotionally for a minute, and trying to find some solutions around this, because this isn't easy. It is a great day to be talking about this. I work as a reporter most of the time, and I want to tell you a little bit about what happened, or what came to Vancouver City Council this afternoon. The first Civil City report concluded that there are 2,000 homeless people in the city of Vancouver. It's a number that's much higher than has previously been part of official reports, but probably still lower than some of the activists we're going to hear from tonight would guess is the right number. The Civil City report also issued no real benchmarks on the drug trade or on panhandling. And I think that's kind of disappointing. I sort of want to throw a note out there that if in the future the city is looking to pay another $300,000 to write summaries of previous city reports, I'm available. The other thing that came before the city today was the plan from BC Housing to build up to 1,100 units on a fairly fast basis of new social housing. And I'm sure we'll hear more about that tonight also. If it's built, it would be the largest single investment in social housing in British Columbia's history. It would also be amazing about face with BC Liberals, given that this is the group that pretty much stopped building social housing about 4 or 5 years ago. If it's going to happen, if it's going to actually come to pass, this project is going to need a degree of political leadership, neighborhood support, and bureaucratic coordination that we have not seen in City Hall this summer. And that's probably going to mean it needs help from each of you. If this is going to actually come to pass, it's probably going to need people to go to City Hall and say, you know what, I want homeless housing in my neighborhood. I hope that you'll think about that. The meeting's coming up on December 12th. So tonight we're going to talk about housing, and I just wanted to talk for a minute about what homelessness might represent to Vancouver's housing market. One way I've come to think about it lately is that homelessness is but the visible tip of a large iceberg. If you'll think with me of a sort of triangle-shaped iceberg, that 2,000 officially, probably several thousand more unofficially, homeless population is what sticks up above the water. It's what we see. It's the people we encounter on a little stroll across the city at night. Just below the surface, there are 125,000 people in Metro Vancouver who are one paycheck away from being homeless. That number comes from the census. Those are people considered at risk of homelessness. These are people for whom a missed paycheck, a family disaster, some kind of emergency, maybe just a bad bender, could wind up having them miss the rent, and next month they could be part of that homeless population, probably surfing on the couches of friends. That 125,000 right underneath the surface is as large a danger to our civility, to our ability to be open with each other, as the few thousand we see. Just below them on the iceberg are something more than 1 million people in Metro Vancouver who are paying more than the federal government recommends you pay for housing. They're paying more than 30%. Whether they're owners or renters, they're still paying a disproportionate share of what they earn to stay housed. And that keeps them in a kind of permanent catch-up mode, where they never quite can get the economic security to move forward because housing gets in the way. That million number also comes from federal figures and also could be low. What could that iceberg do to us? The non-visible part of the iceberg, I think, is actually a bigger threat than homelessness. I want to just talk about a few ways it might come to get us. An entry-level laborer is forced now to compete with the homeless for the cheapest privately operated housing in the market. And working people wind up exposed to the drug and sex trade while they live in fairly appalling conditions. And indeed, as we may hear tonight, we're already seeing pretty high numbers of otherwise functional laborers wind up in addiction. Under these conditions, workers who come here for jobs are very unlikely to settle here and to become part of our community. They're much more likely to take their paychecks and go home as soon as they can. That's not particularly good for our community. By the same token, working-class families, especially those led by single parents, are fleeing the city in search of cheaper housing. As they go, the core idea of Vancouver's new urbanism, that we live where we work and we work where we live, goes with them. And the people who are working in this part of town are increasingly forced to rely on a lack of public transportation on overcrowded roads to come into work during the day and go out to the suburbs at night. They drive all of our costs up in terms of transportation and infrastructure, and they increase the daily carbon load we put out, affecting global warming and other environmental issues. Likewise, as the city center becomes no longer a home for working class and middle class, it winds up being a home for the rich and the poor. We're already seeing this happen in major urban areas like London and New York. There are demographically a missing middle in those cities. And that's what's starting to happen maybe in parts of Yaletown and the West End. The difference is that New York and London are places that rich, affluent, high net worth individuals need to live. There's benefit. They're financial centers. They don't have to live in Vancouver. They live here because it's cool, fun. If it is no longer cool or fun, it's pretty easy to say, you know what, I'll give up the $18 million condo in Vancouver and I'll buy one in Dubai instead. Dubai's cool now. As they go, it may become difficult for Vancouver to support the kind of condo development and trickle-down housing development that it has built over the last decade. Once some unknown number of middle-class, working-class, and upper-class residents find reasons to leave Vancouver's downtown core, the region could face a kind of tipping point. Other cities have found it difficult, if not impossible, to continue building their dreams as cities once these sorts of tipping points are crossed. So when we talk about homeless, well, we tend to talk about the prospect of a few weeks of bad publicity in 2010. I would like to argue that the consequences for not dealing with this whole iceberg are much, much greater than a little bit of embarrassment, much greater than a little emotional tightening as we walk down the street. But indeed, there are consequences that could undermine so much of what Vancouver's become, and so much of what I personally love about this city. So that's doom and gloom. Let me move on. I'm going to make two commitments as your moderator tonight. I'm going to try to keep us focused on housing, and I'm going to try to honor our mutual commitments to time. I hope you'll all join me in those two commitments, and as it becomes your turn to take the mic, your turn to sort of take over this evening, keep in mind that we have this commitment to try to get out of here by 9 o'clock, or at least to end the official portion of this program by 9 o'clock, and we can continue talking as late as we want nearby. And with that, let me introduce our first speaker.